and all is still go as we monitor our status for it. Good luck and Godspeed.
Have you ever had a premonition, a feeling that something dreadful was about to happen?
No, Mother, I have not been drinking.
Do you happen to have a pair of birds that are just friendly?
We all go a little mad sometimes.
I have to go back into the past once more, just once more.
This is HitchPod, a podcast counting down the 20 best movies of the wonderful 20th century director Alfred Hitchcock. I'm Kat Jones. With me is Dan Libke, and in this episode we're comparing the 9th best Hitchcock movie, which was Shadow of a Doubt, with the movie the Oscars deemed to be the best one from that year, Casablanca.
Casablanca, yeah, classic.
Absolutely.
Yes. Before we get to that, of course, we always like to give out a cryptic clue to what our next movie will be.
Mm-hmm. So our next Hitchcock movie.
Yep. So the 8th best Hitchcock film will be the one we're watching next. And the cryptic clue for this one, so try and work this out before the end of the episode. The clue is you need negativity or liabilities to enjoy this film. 9 letters. You need negativity or liabilities to enjoy this film.
This is a fantastic clue.
Yep.
All right, we'll leave that with you. And I think, Dan, you are going to give us some basic info before we go into the recap.
Yeah. So, of course, this is Casablanca from 1942. It has excellent ratings everywhere, 8.5 out of 10 on IMDb, 99% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Woohoo, who's that 1%?
I don't know, some naysayer. No naysayers on Metacritic. Metacritic is at 100% universal acclaim.
Yeah.
Metacritic often rounds up its universal acclaims. You can have like 85% and it'll go, universal acclaim.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
so
very
this
funny.
is a genuine universal acclaim for this one.
Yes, yeah.
We did try and find a negative comment. The only one I could find was a very brief snippet from The New Yorker, which called it pretty tolerable.
Yeah, I think that's negative. It counts as negative.
Yes. Of course, it also was ranked very highly in the American Film Institute's 100 Years of a 100 Movies series. It came in at number 2 in the list of best movies of the last 100 years. So just behind Citizen Kane and just ahead of The Godfather.
Oh, yeah, that was that 100 Years of 100 Movies that women didn't vote in.
Yes, I think so, yes. Yes.
Okay.
In that same series, they also it was rated the number 1 love story. Rick was also the number 4 hero.
Oh.
As Time Goes By was the number 2 song. And it had 6 lines in the top 100 quotes, which is twice as many as the next most popular movie.
Yeah, not surprising.
We'll get to those 6 lines later in the podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, a pretty acclaimed movie. And that was reflected in the Oscars. So we had how many nominations for this one?
Well, nominated in 8 categories and won lots of them.
Yep.
Best Picture, Best Director, Best Screenplay.
Yep.
And the other things it was nominated for: Best Actor, Humphrey Bogart; Best Supporting Actor, Claude Rains; Best Score; Best Cinematography, Black and White; and Best Editing. Didn't win those ones.
Didn't win those ones. No good on those fronts, but still the Best Picture, Best Director, etc. You can watch it for free in Australia. You can, if you, as all Australians do, have access to the ABC iView app. That's on there, so you can track that down and watch it for free. In the US, it's available on Max, but in the UK, you'll have to rent it or buy it via your preferred platform. There's also heaps of DVD and Blu-ray versions. It's been around forever. It's a biggie.
Yeah.
And of course, it stars Humphrey Bogart. He plays Rick. Humphrey Bogart is, of course, also famous for The Maltese Falcon and The African Queen, are probably his other 2 big movies.
Mm-hmm. But Hitchcock never used him.
No.
Too ugly.
Yep. If there's one thing that Hitchcock demanded, it was a lack of ugliness in his cast. Ingrid Bergman is there, and Hitchcock used her. Ingrid Bergman plays Ilsa, and we've already seen her in this countdown already. She's in Spellbound, and she was also in Gaslight, which was one of the movies we had a comparison to earlier on. And, of course, she's also in Notorious, which we may or may not see going forward. Paul Henreid, he played Victor Laszlo, and obviously his other most famous role is in The Exorcist 2, The Heretic. That's the only other thing.
Can't remember him from that one.
Yes. And speaking of actors that Hitchcock did use, we had Claude Rains. He plays Louis, Captain Louis Renault, and he was also Notorious, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, and famously, Claude Rains was the Invisible Man.
I was going to ask, was he invisible in that movie?
I think he was, yeah. I think,
Huh.
yeah, that was the first thing I ever knew Claude Rains was in. Like,
Yeah.
I knew before I started watching any Hitchcock movies,
Yep.
Claude Rains was the Invisible Man. I don't know how I knew that, but I knew
Yep.
that. That was in my brain.
It's a bit of pop culture. And Claude Rains was our favourite in this movie.
I think so, yeah.
Yes,
He
anyway,
was
we'll get to that.
magnificent,
But yeah,
yes.
he was great.
And finally, I mean, there are lots of other actors, but the other standout one was Peter Lorre.
Peter Lorre,
as,
another Hitchcock.
Ugarte.
Yeah.
And again, Hitchcock fans remember him. He was in The Man Who Knew Too Much and also Secret Agent.
Yeah,
So
a bit of a Hitchcock reunion in this movie.
Yeah, very good. The synopsis. Cynical expatriate American cafe owner, so just a few adjectives there, struggles to decide whether or not to help his former lover and her fugitive husband escape the Nazis in French Morocco.
Cafe versus nightclub? I mean, it's clearly a nightclub. So interesting use of the word cafe in those days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's called Rick's Cafe, right? Or Rick's
Yeah.
American Cafe.
Yeah. So it must have been a broader interpretation of that word, I would say.
Yeah. It was written by Julius Epstein and Philip Epstein, the Epstein brothers. They did most of the writing. Howard Koch apparently also did a little bit of writing, but not as much as the Epsteins, from what my research told me. The director, Michael Curtiz, he's been directing in Hungary since 1912. You can scroll all the way back in his IMDb, and he's making short films all the way
Wow.
back to the dawn of cinema. He'd previously directed the pirate movie Captain Blood, and that was in 1936. That got him his first nomination for Best Director. And between 1936 and this movie, he was nominated 3 more times.
Oh, incredible.
Yeah, so he's on a roll. But Casablanca was his first win. And this is, of course, a drama/romance/war movie. You want some taglines for this one?
Oh, yes. What are they?
So here's one. Tagline, Casablanca, where love cuts as deep as a dagger.
No.
Not sure what that means.
That's terrible.
There were a couple of other ones. As big and timely a picture as ever you've seen! Exclamation mark. You can tell by the cast it's important. Gripping, big. There you go.
Okay, that's a verbose.
That's very verbose. You can tell by the cast it's important. Gripping, big.
That feels like a placeholder that somehow got through.
Yep. And the last one, they had a date with fate in Casablanca.
Oh, that's better.
A little bit
That's
of
better.
internal rhyming there.
Yeah.
So, of course, we are about to do the recap. And if you haven't seen it, now's your chance to do so. If you're in Australia, pop on your ABC iView.
Yeah, go watch it. I mean, of course, we'll put some spoilers here, but I think a lot of people know the plot of this movie before they've even watched it. Even if you listen to this, it's still worth going and watching the movie because you'll get a lot out of it on top of whatever Dan's about to recap here now.
I feel like I knew pretty much the entire plot of this, and
Yeah.
I'd never seen it before this time, but I knew essentially everything that was coming. But it was still great to watch. It was one of my most enjoyable movies in this countdown. Without getting too far ahead of ourselves.
Yeah.
So let's get going with the recap. So we do start the movie with if George Lucas had directed this movie, this would have been like a Star Wars crawl. Lots of information, lots of background dumping of what was going on, and maybe you can give us a reading of what the Star Wars crawl for Casablanca said.
Do you know what? I can't remember if this was on screen in words or spoken.
I think it was spoken.
It was
but,
spoken,
yeah.
wasn't it? Because we had a bit of background visual going.
Yeah, we were cutting through various scenes of Casablanca.
Okay, so here we go. With the coming of the Second World War, many eyes in imprisoned Europe turned hopefully or desperately toward the freedom of the Americas. Lisbon became the great embarkation point, but not everybody could get to Lisbon directly, so a tortuous roundabout refugee trail sprung up. Paris to Marseille, across the Mediterranean to Iran, and then by train, auto or foot across the rim of Africa to Casablanca in French Morocco. Here the fortunate ones, through money or influence or luck, might obtain exit visas and scurry to Lisbon, and from Lisbon to the New World. But the others wait in Casablanca and wait and wait and wait.
Yes. So you can just imagine that text scrolling away from us as we start the movie.
Yeah.
So we are in Casablanca in Morocco in December 1941, and we bump into Rick. This is Humphrey Bogart, and he runs Rick's Cafe American. And as we kind of alluded to there, the politics of the city were probably very well understood in 1943. Not so much in 2024.
No.
It's a little bit hard to wrap your head around, but we did do a little bit of research, and we'll try and simplify it a bit. So apologies in advance if we haven't got this all right. We're not historians, but this is roughly how we understand it.
And you do enjoy the movie more if you know this going in, I
Yeah.
think. Otherwise, there's a little bit of who's who, why they're Nazis, what's going on.
Yeah.
I think that really helps.
Yeah, so Casablanca had been under French rule since 1912. That's when the French colonised it, essentially. The Nazis invaded France, took over France in 1940, and an armistice was signed between the Germans and France. Germany was allowed to occupy most of France itself, including all the ports to the Atlantic and the English Channel, so they wanted to cover off their bases there. But France, or the French people, were still allowed to retain control of their non-European territories, so not France itself, but everything else they were in charge of, including Casablanca. And the idea was basically this was a temporary situation until Germany just got through the trivial task of knocking over England and invading it, then they could sort everything out with a permanent treaty. So French troops elsewhere in the colonial empire were ordered that they had to defend their territory against everybody. So Allies, Nazis, everybody was treated equally. They were effectively neutral.
They're all enemies.
Yes, everybody was enemies. So they're all neutral. Rick is enjoying this neutrality. It means he can run his bar, get money from everybody, Nazis, Allies, whoever pops in. He
All
can
the
get it all.
refugees that are travelling through,
Yes.
who are mostly rich, otherwise they wouldn't have got that far.
Exactly, yes. And so that's pretty much where we are. Everyone's trying to get in here, and as you said in the crawl at the beginning, this is the embarkation point to get out of here into the United States. So Rick is met by Ugarte. This is Peter Lorre, and he's just this slimy little dude. And he murdered a couple of German couriers and claimed their letters of transit. And these letters are important because they allow anybody who holds them to travel anywhere they please. This is one of the keys to getting out of Casablanca and away to the US. So they're very valuable. Ugarte thinks he could sell them to the highest bidder. Unfortunately, before he could do this, he's arrested by Louis, the French chief of police, and he's a very corrupt police officer, but he's very hilarious. He's by far the best character in the movie.
This is Claude Rains.
Claude Rains, yes. But before Ugarte was arrested and he's eventually killed, he actually handed off the transit letters to Rick, and he hid them in the piano of Sam, his in-house piano man. And there are also Nazis sniffing about the place the whole time. So it's all very, very tense here. And this is where Ilsa pops into the bar or the cafe. Ilsa is Ingrid Bergman, and she's Rick's ex. And we flash back to see their romance in Paris, as well as how that romance ended, which was by her telling Rick that, wait a sec, the Nazis are going to be in Paris soon, we've got to get out of here. And then she just kind of stood him up at the train station and said, oh, well, off you go by yourself. She sent him a letter, and he read it all sadly in the rain as the ink ran away. So very rude from her. But she has a reason for her rudeness. Ilsa has a husband, and this is Victor Laszlo, and he's a resistance leader who the Nazis are keeping a very close eye on. They don't want him to escape from Casablanca because he's too dangerous if he gets away and can organise resistance elsewhere in the world. But they can't actually do anything to him in this neutral territory, so they're just kind of lurking around looking for an excuse to arrest him or do something to him, but they can't just arrest him on no reason. So Laszlo and Ilsa they're hunting for these letters they've heard of that will let them get out of Casablanca to the US, and they learn pretty quickly that Rick has the letters. Laszlo tries to buy them off Rick, but Rick refuses, and this inspires Laszlo to start a sing-along of the French national anthem to drown out some German beer hall tunes, and that's a pretty famous scene of the movie. But it's also enough to get the Nazis all angry and cross with this kind of behaviour, this deliberate taunting of them by singing French songs. So they tell Louis that, we have to shut this cafe down, and Louis makes up an excuse and shuts down the cafe, which annoys Rick. And Ilsa is also annoyed that Rick won't hand over the letters, and she shows up with a gun, threatens to shoot him unless he turns them over. But he talks her out of that idea, and then she drops some further backstory on us. She tells us that she'd been married to Laszlo all along. Their entire affair was because she thought he'd been killed because he'd been taken away to a concentration camp, and the only reason she stood Rick up at the train station back in Paris was because she learnt that Laszlo was still alive and needed her help, but she still loves Rick the most, improbable as that may seem to some people. And Rick says, okay, that's fine, I'll help Laszlo leave. And then Laszlo's arrested on some nonsense charge that Louis has made up. It's such a nonsense charge that everybody knows that Laszlo will beat it. So Rick comes up with a scheme. He tells Louis, wait a sec, we can frame Laszlo. Let him out. Let him come to the bar. I'll give him the letters and then you can arrest him for that and then he'll be in proper trouble. So that's exactly what happens. Laszlo's released. He goes to pick up the letters. Louis shows up to arrest him, but Rick pulls a gun on Louis and they all flee to the airport. And that's where Rick pulls the big switcheroo, telling Ilsa that she's not going to be going to America with Rick, but she's instead going to America with her husband. He's going to say, yep, you two can have these letters. Off you go. Ilsa doesn't seem to want to go, but Rick insists. And the Germans, meanwhile, they're also racing to the airport to stop this from happening. Ilsa jumps on the plane. Off they fly. The main Nazi, whose name is Strasser, he shows up to stop the plane. He's a little bit too late, and Rick shoots him. And that's almost the end of the movie. The rest of the police have also shown up by now. Louis feigns confusion about who shot Strasser. He's like, I'm not quite sure what's happened here, but he orders his men to start an investigation immediately. And he and Rick then agree to join the local resistance against the Nazis, and they walk off into the fog set. And that's the end of the movie.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So what did you think of it, Dan? This is the first time you've seen this. I've seen it once before.
Right.
It's only my second time.
Yeah, and I loved it. It's as we mentioned, it's sufficiently famous and well known that I knew the basic outline of the plot. I knew most of the big quotes and the misquotes, and lots of the big scenes. But it's still fun seeing it for the first time, even when you know all these, like, you know enough from context what to expect. It's still fun to actually see it. I felt the same way the first time I saw The Godfather. I knew so many quotes and scenes, like I knew the horse's head, all that kind of stuff, and then it actually happens. Oh, yeah, this is it. This is what you originally saw. Yeah, it was the exact same feeling here. Yeah,
I loved it too. It was fantastic. I was sure the first time I saw it, I was sure it would be overrated. Yeah, and I watched it, and the second time I watched it as well. But no, it's not overrated at all. It's actually as good as it's. Whatever's on the box, it's true.
It's a really good movie. It's, no lies detected.
And the plot is really tight. So the fact that there's this failed romance and there's a reason why they can't be together, and it's a really valid reason. It's not a trumped up reason. Yep. It's very cleverly done. Yeah. I also enjoyed the symbolism. I mean, it's obviously very symbolic of the US entering the war. Rick is essentially the US. The whole thing takes place like 2 days before Pearl Harbor. Yeah. So it's all right. He's the neutral party. Will he enter the war? Won't he enter the war? What's he going to do? Which side's he going to take? Yeah. Yeah. One thing that did kind of stand out to me was the talk about the concentration camps seemed kind of very cavalier given what we now know about them. And this was mostly because in 1943, the extent to what was happening, people weren't really aware of what was going on. So it was kind of grim every time they mentioned, I'll take you away to the concentration camps. It's like, oh, bloody hell. Because it was just kind of thrown casually out there as, this is like, we'll take you away, put you in prison. No, shit, this is much darker than that. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly. Yes. And we both enjoyed the fact that Ilsa's husband was such a hero. Yeah. So she didn't really want to be with him, but there was no denying that he was definitely a hero and we needed to save him. And probably he was the most important person in the movie, if it was real life. So very interesting. I think in a lesser movie, like you would have seen Laszlo be undercut somehow. Like it would have been, he's not worthy of Ilsa. Ilsa secretly belongs. He would have been Rick. Beating his dog or something like that. Yeah, but no, he was charming and delightful and heroic. Yeah, an actual hero and there was no undercutting of that in any way. Like inspirational. He's the one who leads the singing of the song to kind of stand up to the Germans in the bar. Exactly, and far more handsome than Rick. Yes. We got some other interesting facts about the movie. So, when do you think the soundtrack to Casablanca was first released? Well, it was nominated for Best Score. Yeah. So I presume it was, top of the charts at the time and then released at the time. No, it was first released in 1997. Good grief. So yeah, I think soundtracks weren't commonly released in back in those days. The full soundtrack wasn't, but the couple of songs that were famous, as obviously. Time goes by, yes. But I thought that was funny that it took till 1997 for them to actually. They saw this up and coming technology called the CD compact disc, and they thought, let's put the Casablanca soundtrack on that. Yeah, make the most of that.
Speaking of audio, apparently the first time the film was dubbed into German, they also re-edited it, so it was essentially completely absent of Nazis, which cut out about 25 minutes of the film and obviously meant the story made almost no sense whatsoever. And it took about 23 years before they actually did a proper German dub of the actual movies. That's very funny.
Yes.
And there's one other kind of interesting note of more recent times. So in 2015, there were terrorist attacks in Paris that killed 130 people. And the clip of the Duel of the Anthems, which we were talking about, that trended on social media as kind of a symbol of French solidarity.
Yes, that's good.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah, showing the French national anthem, absolutely drowning out whatever the Nazis were singing.
Yeah. Very good.
Terrific. So let's have a look at what this director, Michael Curtiz, was thinking. I mean, he was obviously an acclaimed and very accomplished director, and he got this originally from a play, right? It was an unproduced play.
Yeah, it's a play called Everybody Comes to Rick's, which is not a great title.
No, it sounds like a comedy.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And the play is apparently set entirely in the cafe, which makes sense, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, there was a fair bit of it in the cafe, and that was by Murray Burnett and Joan Allison.
Yes.
And the rights to it were bought for $20,000. So that was the most ever paid for an unproduced play. So the Epstein brothers, added some colour and so on. And obviously it got a new name, Casablanca. But other than that, some of the faithful play was kept.
Yeah. And apparently the Epsteins were writing the script even as the movie was being filmed.
Oh.
According to legend, Bergman had no idea whether her character would leave with Laszlo or stay with Rick through most of the shooting. Obviously it's not shot in order, so at some point the decision was made. And she should have also known that the Hays Code meant that Ilsa pretty much either had to end up with Laszlo or Laszlo had to die. Like, there was no real way around that because, you can't have a woman be with anybody other than her husband according to the code.
And they cleverly got around the fact that she'd had an affair because she thought he was already dead.
Yes, and they hammered that home in the dialogue.
So apparently the song As Time Goes By was in the play and then obviously kept for the movie because it fits so well. Yeah. It's perfect.
Yeah. When the movie was being shot, there was a little bit of friction between the actors, apparently. Henri apparently considered Bogart a mediocre actor. But he wasn't particularly beloved by his castmates either. Bergman thought that he was a prima donna, and Claude Rains called him Paul Hemorrhoid. So,
oh, my goodness.
Yes. So, but interestingly, Joseph Cotton was apparently considered for the role of Laszlo.
So that would have been great if we had Joseph Cotton in this one.
Presumably he was too busy doing Shadow of a Doubt, but that would have really made the comparison between the two movies even more interesting.
He would have been great as Laszlo as well. I mean,
he's definitely got the looks, definitely got the charm and the charisma. Yes.
And Bogart wasn't just ugly, he was short. So Bergman really, I mean, he was punching well above his weight with Bergman. It wasn't a convincing pairing.
No.
And I think that's where some people just go, I don't get the romance.
Yeah.
But anyway, Bergman was 2 inches taller than him. So obviously she was sitting down a lot and not standing next to him. And
or he was
all of that.
standing on a box or something. Yeah, all the classic tricks that they do when the man's shorter than the woman. Can't ever have a woman be taller than a man on a movie screen.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of other people in the cast. There were a lot of Europeans in the cast who had fled to the US, so this was very personal to them. And the shooting of the Duel of the Anthem sequence had many of them in tears, most notably Madeleine LeBeau. She and her Jewish husband, Marcel Dalio, they'd taken essentially the journey you described in the opening there. They'd fled France ahead of the Nazis, and so her tears and line of Vive la France, they were apparently very, very real. And she only died very recently too.
Really?
And apparently when she died, like I'm talking within the last decade or so, and when she died, like everybody showed that clip of her shouting that on social media, shared that one.
Incredible. Yeah. And this movie was actually first shown in 1942 in New York, and that was for marketing reasons, a screening to capitalise on the Allies capturing the actual city of Casablanca.
Yeah, good marketing from whoever was distributing this. Wait a second.
Very good.
We've got a movie.
Yeah, we've got a movie that really highlights this city. city. And so anyway, it was eligible for the 1943 Oscars for that reason.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, this is deep in the middle of the war.
Yeah.
It's incredible, a war movie coming out in the middle of the war it's about.
That's crazy to think of, isn't it?
It is incredible.
Yeah. And they also timed the release, like the wider release of the movie, again, based on the actual events of the war. Crazy.
Yeah.
Because there was something called the Casablanca Conference, which was where Winston Churchill and Franklin D. Roosevelt met up to discuss strategies or tactics or whatever presidents and prime ministers discussed during war. And that took place in January 1943. So, yep, this is when we're doing the wide release of this Casablanca movie to coincide.
Incredible. And so massive critical success and a moderate box office success. And I think that's probably, it's a bit like the pandemic effect, right? Like in the middle of the war, do we really want to go to a movie about the war?
Yeah.
I mean, people did go to a lot of movies and there were show reels and all sorts of other things, but I think they wanted a fair bit of escapism with their cinema during the wartime, and this is very much about war interrupting romance, which people were not that happy about, I would say.
Okay, so best lines. But before we get to our favourite lines of this movie, we're going to play a little game. You may have noticed when I did the recap a little bit earlier that I didn't mention a whole heap of famous lines from the movie. That's because, as we mentioned earlier, there were 6 lines in the top 100 AFI list. And I'm going to see if Kat can guess all 6 that made that list. So have a stab at which ones you think, just based on your general vibe of the movie, which ones do you think would have made the top 100 list?
Okay, which one's the most famous? I think it's the "Here's looking at you, kid" is the most famous line. Mind you, I can't really remember when this is said.
He says it multiple times.
He does say it a couple of times,
but I
this
think
is Bogart to Bergman, right?
Yeah, I think the most famous moment is right at the end when he's saying goodbye for the last time. So yes, that's number 5 on the list. He's looking at you, kid.
All right.
So you got 5 to go. 5 other quotes from this movie made the top 100.
Okay,
what other quotes can you remember?
The other famous quote, of course, is the one that's often misquoted as "Play it again, Sam," and that is "Play it, Sam. Play as time goes by."
That is
Something
correct.
like that.
Yes.
Yep.
That is also in there. The incorrect "Play it again, Sam" line is in there. That's number 28.
Yeah. Okay, that's good.
So 4 to go.
All right. So I want to give you my favourite line now, and that one is "Round up the usual suspects," which is such a great line.
Yep.
The very end when when he's shot the Nazi and the police crew turn up.
Yep.
Someone's been shot.
It took me a while to rewrite that last paragraph of the recap, so I didn't say "round up the usual suspects" because it's such a famous line. I just wanted to type it in there. And that, of course, also bookends it because he starts the movie more or less by saying "round up the usual suspects" as well.
It's very clever. It's a really great moment because we think that Rick's going to get turned in.
Yep.
Because actually, Claude Rains has been mostly a really unreliable character. He's been
great.
playing both sides. He's been having sex with all sorts of women. He's been doing all sorts of things that are extremely underhand and collaborating with the Nazis in some ways. And then at the very end, it just the effect is perfect because we don't know what he's going to do.
Yeah.
So that when he says "round up the usual suspects" instead of saying "seize him,"
it's fantastic.
is fantastic. Best.
So
line.
that's definitely in the top 100. It is in fact number 32. So you've still got 2 that are lower than 30, like higher numbers.
Right.
The number 43 and number 67th ranked are still out there, but there's also one that's even more famous than a couple you mentioned.
Really?
Number 20 on the list. So three to go. Can you think of any more?
Okay, so there's another one that I'm not sure I'll get the wording right, but there's the, of all the gin joints in all the world, she strolls into mine or something like that.
Of all the gin joints in all the towns in all the world, she walks into mine. That's number 67.
That's great. Really? So that's quite low.
Yep. So 2 to go. You're doing very well here. Can you get the last 2?
I don't think I have any more.
Yeah. What about the very final line of the movie?
Oh, God. Oh, that's when they're walking off into the fog, right?
Yep.
Oh, I don't know. What does he say? He said, this is a beautiful friendship or something like that.
Yeah, essentially. Louis, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. Yes, I knew that was the famous last line. And there's one more, which I don't consider necessarily as famous. Maybe it's so famous that I don't even think of it as it being associated with this movie.
Right. Who says this one?
It's Rick. Rick says this one, and it's again as part of like just this ongoing cavalcade of famous quotes as he's farewelling Ilsa at the end.
Oh, this is another one at the end.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess there's a lot of famous stuff right at the end, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
The last one, the one you missed was "We'll always have Paris," which doesn't really feel like a Casablanca line, but it definitely is.
We'll always have Paris.
Yes.
Okay.
So there you go. 5 out of 6 is very good. There was another one that was nominated but didn't quite make the top 100. So
What was that?
This was Ilsa. I'm no good at being noble, but it doesn't take much to see that the problems of 3 little people don't amount to a hill of beans in this crazy world.
Yes. That's because that hill of beans is very famous.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. So
but
there
it's
you go.
such a long quote. I guess it's not
Yeah.
quite as snappy.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there you go. Six quotes. As I said, that's
Amazing.
twice as many. I think the Wizard of Oz had 3. I bet.
Yeah.
It dominated the quotes. Very
That's
quotable.
really great. And but I think we had some other favourites.
Yeah.
that-
I think Louis was our favourite character. He was just a quote machine.
He was so funny. I mean, I think all of the quotes we've just mentioned are all overrated.
Yeah.
Perhaps, I think Round Up the Usual Suspects maybe
It's pretty good.
is pretty good, but the
Yeah.
rest of them pretty overrated. They don't really, they could have been anything.
Yeah.
Really. But Louis, Rick and Louis discussing Victor Laszlo's chances of escaping Casablanca. And Louis says, "This is the end of the chase." Rick, 20,000 francs, says it isn't. Louis, "Is that a serious offer?" Rick, "I just paid out 20. I'd like to get it back." And Louis says, "Make it 10. I'm only a poor, corrupt official."
So he knows exactly what he is. He's
Yeah.
he's not ashamed of it.
Fantastic.
Yes. A little bit later, after that, we have Louis speaking to Rick. He's saying, "Rick, there are many exit visas sold in this cafe, but we know that you've never sold one. That is the reason we permit you to remain open." And Rick says, "Oh, I thought it was because I let you win at roulette." Louis says, "That is another reason."
And we do find out that Rick is completely manipulating the roulette wheel
Yes.
because he's often letting people win in order for them to win enough money to escape.
Yes.
If he likes them.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, another Louis.
Yep.
Louis says, "A bottle of your best champagne and put it on my bill." And the waiter says, "Very well, sir." And Laszlo says, "Captain, please." And Louis says, "Oh, please, monsieur. It's a little game we play. They put it on the bill. I tear up the bill. It is very convenient." So Louis just doesn't have to pay for anything. It's so fantastic.
Yeah, he's such a good character. As you mentioned, this is a scene where Rick does let a Bulgarian couple win enough money on the roulette table for a bribe, and the wife comes over to Louis and says, "Captain Renault, may I?" She's going to pay him off with the money she's just won. And Louis says, "Oh no, not here, please. Come to my office tomorrow morning. We'll do everything businesslike." And the woman says, "We'll be there at 6. And Louis says, "I'll be there at 10.
That was so funny. Very good. Another funny line. Laszlo is referring here to Ugarte, the guy at the start who had the visas. "May I speak to him now?" And Strasser says, "You would find the conversation a trifle one-sided. Senor Ugarte is dead." And Ilsa says, "Oh." And then Louis pipes up, "I am making out the report now. We haven't quite decided yet whether he committed suicide or died trying to escape."
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Very good.
Very,
Just
very
a couple more.
We do know that, of course, he died neither of those ways.
No. So this is after the Nazis tell Louis to shut down Rick's establishment. Rick says, "How can you close me up? On what grounds?" And Louis says, "I'm shocked to find that gambling is going on in here." And then the croupier comes over and says, "You're winning, sir." And Louis says, "Oh, thank you very much."
This is why this movie should be so famous, because it's very funny.
Yep.
Another one, Rick says to Louis, "Sit down." And Louis says, "Put that gun down." And Rick says, "I don't want to shoot you, but I will if you take one more step." And then Louis says, "Under the circumstances, I will sit down."
So there you go. That's why he's our favourite character in the movie.
He's really good.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. The Bechdel test. Do we pass?
No, don't pass. So you
not even
don't
close.
even think we have 2 named women.
No. Yeah.
Anyway, but quickly moving along, technology. So modern technology in the current days, how would that change the plot if it was made now.
One idea I had was that the Battle of the Anthems, I like the idea of the two groups, the Germans and the French, fighting for control of the shared Spotify playlist that the bar has.
Yep.
So they're all just adding their national anthems and taking control of the Bluetooth and trying to get control of it. So, yeah, I think that would work.
Oh, that would work really well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that would also avoid any confusion about the play it again, Sam.
Yes.
So Ilsa just hits repeat or whatever. Like it's hit repeat, and she might actually just be talking to the Google Home or whatever it is.
Yeah. Okay, Alexa, play it again. Play it again, Alexa.
Yeah, play it again, Alexa. That's fantastic.
I also like the idea of while Rick's waiting for Ilsa to join him as they're fleeing Paris. I like the idea of him sending text to her, just going, "Oh, where are you? What's going on?" And she just leaves him on read.
Yes,
no replies,
no
and he's
reply.
just like, it's very sad.
Yep.
Yes. What about tributes, homages, or remakes?
There are thousands of them. We probably can't go through them all, or this podcast will be 3 hours long. There's definitely a couple of TV series, neither of which really lasted. Some of them were cancelled. I mean, you really can't replicate. No. Why bother trying to replicate such a fabulous movie? A sequel novel, apparently. A sequel novel of, what would that just be, Laszlo and Ilsa enjoying the Americas or something?
No, I think they went the other way. I think they went with Rick and Louis. Although it would have been more casual and laid back if it was just Ilsa and Laszlo just chilling out in America.
Yeah.
Yes. There are also some apparently some attempts to turn it into a musical or stage the original play. None of these things we're talking about were successful.
No, we shouldn't even mention them. No. But there's zillions of parodies. So the most famous one, right? The movie The Usual Suspects. So that was riffing on the Round Up the Usual Suspects, and that is a wonderful way of continuing the legacy of this movie.
Yep.
The Usual Suspects. So great.
Yeah. And infamously, this was one of the films that was colorized in the 1980s. There was a bit of a colorizing craze back then, and people got upset about it, and people, studios wanted to do it, and Anyway, there was a colorized version of this movie that aired on TV in 1984. Again, not a success. Bogart's son Stephen Bogart said, "If you're going to colorize Casablanca, why not put arms on the Venus de Milo?"
That is great too. I totally agree with Stephen. That's fantastic. What a great quote.
We got one more related thing here.
Right. What have you got?
So in 1982, for the magazine Film Comment, a writer called Chuck Ross played a prank. He retyped the entire screenplay, submitted it to a whole heap of agencies under the name Everybody Comes to Rick's, and just to see what would happen. Most of the agents returned it unread.
Oh, wow.
Because that's general policy, I think.
Yep.
But of the ones who actually did read it, he had a pretty good hit rate of people who fell for the prank. So about 50% of the people recognised it or said, "Oh, this is much like Casablanca." But a whole heap of others just rejected the screenplay. Someone said, "Too much dialogue, not enough exposition. The storyline was weak, and in general, it didn't hold my interest." And he had 3 people offering to represent it.
Oh, goodness.
So they liked it, but didn't recognise it. And one person wanted to turn it into a novel.
That's a very funny prank. That's great.
Yes. And what about the Oscar movie cinematic universe? How are we tying this one into the
Well,
others?
we do have someone who was in the war, someone from The Godfather. I can't remember his name. Which one of them?
Michael Corleone.
The main dude?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. He was a pilot during the war, so
he was flying people from Lisbon to the Americas, maybe.
Almost.
Who knows?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. All right, so let's quickly go through the Hitchcock movie checklist here.
Do we have a MacGuffin?
I think we do. I think that the letters are very MacGuffin-ish.
Yes.
They're borderline plot device.
That's right.
But by the time you do get to the end of the movie, they're almost irrelevant as a plot device. It's still like who actually has to see the letters before they get on a plane?
It's never really clear. Everyone's looking for them, but a lot of people are getting on planes without these letters. So anyway, it's I think they are a MacGuffin. I think you're right.
Yeah. We didn't have a cameo, but the director could have easily popped himself into the bar during any early scenes.
There were a lot of people in those scenes, and there were some funny visual gags in those moments as well from people who are doing different things in the gambling and so on. We have a lead character at a standstill. So that, I guess, is Rick.
Yeah.
I mean, he was on the run first. He fled Paris.
Yep.
And now very much on a standstill. At least everyone pretty much who was trying to leave is at a standstill and marking time until they
find the MacGuffin.
Yeah, until they find the MacGuffin.
Yep. Some characters with elements of good and bad.
I think so. I mean, I think they're all a little bit grey to start with. And then one of the best things about the movie is that, well, I mean, obviously Laszlo's not grey to start with. He's very
pretty
much
noble, yeah.
he's on the good side. But the others, we're never quite sure if they're good or bad, including Rick, right until the end. And I think that's one of the things that makes this so fabulous.
And Louis, of course, is magnificent. He's
Yes.
flip-flopping back and forth. He doesn't care.
He doesn't care at all.
Yeah, fantastic. What about a smart young woman? Is Ilsa smart enough to qualify as a smart young
We
woman?
only have one woman. She's smart.
Yeah.
You know, there's...
Is she so smart that she's manipulating Rick all along? Did she really want to get on the plane with Laszlo and she's just going, oh, Rick, I love you so much?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, that's what I like to think too.
I hope so.
Yeah.
What about bumbling cops? Well, we do kind of have bumbling cops. They're sort of double agents in a way, some of them, and some of the others are...
Bumbling / corrupt.
Yeah.
And of course, bumbling Nazis.
There's always bumbling Nazis.
Arrive on the scene too late.
All right, and what other tropes did you find?
Okay, so over at TV Tropes, we tracked down Beam Me Up Scotty. And this is the trope that is for when people say things that, or quote things that were never actually part of the thing. So Beam Me Up Scotty was famously never actually said on Star Trek, despite the fact everybody quotes it. And again, play it again, Sam. Not actually said in this movie.
Why isn't that trope called Play It Again, Sam?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess Beam Me Up Scotty got there first, or got there most famously. Being good sucks is a trope. So this is basically how all three of the main characters are all sacrificing something for the greater good.
Yep.
So that's good. Mysterious past. This is Rick's mysterious past. No, we don't really know why Rick had to leave America, why his papers are stamped unable to return.
We don't know why he was in Paris.
We don't know why he was in Paris. We don't really know much about him, why he's... apparently the writers didn't even know. They spent a lot of time trying to think of a reason why Rick was unable to return to America. And finally, one of them just said, unpaid parking tickets. And at that point, they said, let's leave it vague.
Yeah.
We've got the classic off into the distance ending, which is where people just run off into the... Yeah, it's usually into the sunset, this time into the fog.
But also the plane takes a couple of characters off into the distance as well. So it's very much in that way.
Yes. Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated. This is Laszlo.
Yeah.
And the stealth insult, and this is a quote that we didn't mention earlier. This is from our man Louis again. Lovely stealth insult, this one. Major Strasser is one of the reasons the Third Reich enjoys the reputation it has today.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes.
Wowee. Okay, so Casablanca beat Shadow of a Doubt at the Oscars. Rightly so.
Yeah.
But, how could Shadow of a Doubt have borrowed a bit from Casablanca to get some Oscar juice? What could it have done?
Well, obviously needed a lot more quotable lines.
Yeah.
it had 0 in the top 100 list.
Fair enough.
Need to fix that up pretty quick.
Uncle Charlie could... I mean, noir films like this quite often do have famous lines, but Uncle Charlie could have dropped a few of those. He was ranting too long. He should have kept it brief.
Yeah, kept it brief, kept it catchy, kept it famous. He could have dropped a "Here's looking at you, kid" at Niece Charlie.
Yeah, easily.
Thousands of times.
Yeah,
Yes.
definitely.
Or maybe Niece Charlie could have complained of all the suburban houses in all the quietest towns in all the world. Uncle Charlie walks into mine.
Yep.
Yes. What else could we have changed?
Yeah, I think that Uncle Charlie and Charlie, they went into some kind of bar, didn't they? Or
did,
some kind of that was
Yes.
probably a real cafe.
Yep.
So we would have had to have spent a lot more time in there. There would have had to be a lot more gambling going on, I think.
roulette tables, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
So
spend the entire movie in that one scene.
Yep.
Now you've got something.
yeah, exactly.
I also think at the end of the movie, maybe Uncle Charlie just convinces young Charlie to get on the train and leave, and he remains nobly behind to deal with the family.
Yeah, have my ticket.
Yes.
Yeah, it's possible.
Yes. So I think that's pretty much wrapping it up. Where do we rank Casablanca against the other movies?
Well, we're first up. Where are you ranking it? You go first.
I'm ranking this. It's easily my number 2. It's just behind the Godfather. I love the Godfather, unlike you, and it's only just behind. It's really good.
Yeah, incredible. Okay, well, I'm putting Casablanca right at the top of mine,
Yeah.
above Gaslight and Rebecca, and I think it's a reasonable distance above Gaslight. This is fabulous.
Yeah, it's a really good movie.
Deserves the Oscar.
It did indeed. So, Are we going to
the
let
next
people know
movie,
what the
right.
next movie will be?
Yeah, the 8th best Hitchcock movie we're up to, and that will be next time we podcast. And our listeners have voted on this, and the cryptic clue was you need negativity or liabilities to enjoy this film. 9 letters. You could probably guess just from the 9 letters. But
Probably.
the answer
Is?
notorious. So explain how that one's built up.
So notorious. So negativity is not, or is or, and liabilities are IOUs.
Yes.
So put those 3 together. Negativity or liabilities, that's not or IOUS. Notorious.
Very clever cryptic clue. Beautifully done by Dan. So we're going to rewatch Notorious. Notorious was from 1946.
Yep.
And we're getting some more Ingrid Bergman and some more Claude Rains.
Yes.
This is a great little segue to our next movie.
Yes. So this was my 12th ranked Hitchcock movie, so just outside my personal top 10, but I'm looking forward to watching it again. And you had it.
I love this movie. I have it number 3.
Wow.
So this is one of my absolute favourites, and I think Ingrid Bergman plays a very similar role. So very similar role to Casablanca,
Yep.
I might say. So I think that's wonderful, and I'm looking forward to rewatching this. I'm not sure. Will our opinions change? Who knows?
We will let you know next month. So if you have any questions or feedback on Notorious, you can get them into us. You can email them to us at feedback@hitchpodonline.com, and we will do our best to answer them in the next episode. And we will speak to you next month.
Thank you for listening to HitchPod. Please come and talk to us on Twitter at HitchPod Tweets or on Facebook by searching for HitchPod. And you can also email us directly at feedback@hitchpodonline.com. And if you want more Hitchcock content, please consider becoming a HitchPod supporter. Just go to patreon.com/HitchPod. And for as little as $2 a month, you can get access to our Season 1 coverage of every single Hitchcock movie, as well as bonus episodes on Hitchcock-esque movies. Invitations also to watch live rewatches and much, much more.